So my name is Kit Needham. I'm the director of Project Olympus, which is the Startup Incubator program for CMU. And what we do is we help students, faculty, staff, alumni explore the commercial potential of their business idea. And it could be, I'll just say, at any stage. And I've had some come in on the back of a napkin. An idea, although some have come out of classes a little bit more well-formed. We take high-tech, low-tech, no-tech. We take social enterprises. It doesn't matter to us. What we're trying to teach is the methodology for evaluating whether it could be a good business or not. So we always start these connects out with actually the connects exercise. So how many, this is your first connect? Okay, so what this is, and we've been doing this for years, allows those who have a startup idea but are looking for a potential teammate or somebody who could help them stand up and say, hi, my name is so-and-so. I'm working on a project in this space, and I'm looking for somebody, if you have an idea of what type of background or skills you're looking for, that would, what I call, have the cup of coffee. So this is just a conversation and no obligation afterwards, but this is how people meet. We had founders who actually had a successful exit, one of our early ones, found each other during the connects. But we also have people that don't have an idea, but want to sort of dip a toe and learn more about startups. And so you can say, I don't have an idea, but my background is such and such, these are my interests, and I'd be willing to work for a while with the team if this is helpful. Sometimes I have some of my teams a little further along that have an announcement, like they're going to do a launch, or they need something, like they need some volunteers to test drive, or they need an introduction to so-and-so. So this is just a place to tap into everybody who's in the room. And it doesn't necessarily work the first time, but if you come to these enough, that you will find that literally this is how things happen. So networking, networking, networking. So do I have a volunteer? Here we go. What's your name?
My name is Chris.
Say again?
My name is Chris Elston. I don't have an idea, but I am a representative of the Graduate Entrepreneurship Club, and I'd love to plug one of our events that we have coming up next week.
Okay, go ahead.
So Graduate Entrepreneurship Club is this connector between all of the different grad programs here at CMU. We have an event coming up next week on September 30th called the Student Residence Career Fair. We're going to bring in startups, venture capital firms, and search funds that have opportunities for graduate students to take in-semester pro bono, part-time internships, kind of learn if they'd like to work in startups, venture, search, and then hopefully those convert into internships and full-time career opportunities down the road. So you can find us on Turn Connect under the Graduate Entrepreneurship Club, and then you can find the event as a Student Residence Career Fair there as well, or feel free to reach out to me either after this or via email. Thank you.
Okay, so if that didn't come up on the recording in there, just to the Graduate Entrepreneurship Club is having an event next week on a student
in residence career fair.
Student in Residence Career Fair, and just go into the GEC website and you can learn more information.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Was it?
Chris.
Yeah. Okay.
I believe it might be.
Do we have any other brave souls? Entrepreneurs cannot be shy. And so if you just want to stand up and talk about your idea and you don't have a need, glad to hear it. There we go.
My name is Aronan. I'm actually not a graduate student nor a student here. I incubated here. My friend and co-founder is a research assistant here. I work on a particular idea. It's been a long started studying. I build robots for testing automation, including the software framework. And I sell to IT companies like Wipro, HCL, and these companies, they integrate with their software and they will provide the complete solution for the audience.
Okay, so say your name again.
My name is Aronan.
Okay, so if you are interested or just want to follow up, he's there, and maybe you can hang around for a minute afterwards.
I'm here in US to build 3 of my office space in 3 cities in US, and also I'm raising funds. They are about 2 million revenue streams. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Okay. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Ashley Real. I am a part-time MBA student here. I'm working on a very early initial idea about postpartum recovery for women. So we're looking at creating an app that can help cover the bridge between when you have a child and before you meet with a doctor 6 weeks later. So we're very early stage. I actually just applied for Project Olympus. I'm meeting with a mentor.
This sounded very familiar. So yeah. Okay.
But if anyone's interested, knows anything about like app development, using artificial intelligence and chatbots in the healthcare space, I would love to talk to you.
And your name again?
Ashley Real.
Okay, yeah, so begin with your name, end with your name, because nobody's listening in the beginning. It's only if they think it's an interesting idea, do they care? Okay, so I'm gonna get started on the program right now, and I've been doing this for a while. Actually, I've been doing what I do, which is helping people like you explore the commercial potential of their ideas since 2007. But before that, I actually did this for a large bank that we were exploring new business opportunities. So this process, though, is more adapted based upon the National Science Foundation I-Corps program, which is not only nationwide now, but it's now worldwide, that the methodology. So when I say starting out, is my idea a good one? Is the most important thing you could do, because if you don't get this right, then there's no point in coming up with a business plan, how you're going to market, what the financial is. So this is the methodology, tried and true, and I'm going to walk you through this. So the way you find out is literally ask your customer, and there's no getting around it. You can't do Google surveys. It just doesn't work. It's not the same thing. And the reason why is, biggest reason why things fail is because there really is no market need, meaning that the competition is doing just fine, or people are sort of, oh, it'll be okay, but it's nice to have, not a need to have. So this is all to avoid that complication. So if people do it at all, they do it the wrong way. So they come up with the demo, they have their proof of concept, or they have the app, and they go around, they show people, say, what do you think? Or just talk about their idea. And that does not give you great results. What you really want to do is focus 100% on the problem. And this process is called truly customer discovery. It is part of the entrepreneur language now. It is used by MSF. It's taught, I believe, in some of the entrepreneurship classes. So it's a first phase of what we call the customer phase. Number one thing you have to find out, am I solving a real problem that people have that they will pay for a solution? So we start out 100% on the problem. The next step is then, am I solving it the right way? And then lastly is obviously is acquiring customers, because if you do the first two right, you're likely to get more success on the third step. So customer discovery is simply, what is the pain or problem? Who is having it? Who's going to buy it? How bad is the pain? And my analogy on this, if you go into an emergency room or you go into the doctors and you say, I've got a pain in my stomach, they will always ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is that pain? You're looking for 8, 9s, and 10s. Tends to go lower than that. It's sort of a nice to have, or it's not a big deal. So how are the who currently solving that now? That is the competition. And it could be doing nothing. Getting people to even take the first step or act or download or buy whatever is it's hard, but sometimes the current competition or the current solution is good enough. So you'll see one of the techniques that we use in here is after you find out how people are solving it now, if you were to ask that question on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your current solution? What you're looking for is 1, 2s, and 3s. Big pain or problem, 8, 9s, 10, where the current solution is bad. So not to get too caught up in this, this is the scientific method. You have a hypothesis or a belief or an assumption. You find a way to test it, and then you adjust your results, what your new hypothesis or beliefs or adjustment or your pivots based upon the result. So the first thing starts out with the business thesis. And this is actually harder than it looks, that it is very simply, who is the customer? And this is your buyer and decision maker. So it's not a hospital. Hospitals don't write checks. Universities don't write checks. It's an individual within the hospital. And we say the chief of pathology at large hospitals, you believe is the customer. Will buy, license, subscribe to our platform that helps us read biopsy slides 5 times faster. Why will they buy it? And this is the tricky one, because you think what they're looking for is speed. But what is the true value you're creating? And so this is actually, I'll kind of use this analogy as we go through, that what a team that I coached in the National Science Foundation I4 National Program actually had this product, and they believed it was pathologists in large hospitals would buy it because it would speed up getting the results. So customer is a big word and it's pretty inclusive, but I would call it more stakeholders, because there are different people who are part of the customer chain. And the two you want to focus on most when you're doing this initial customer discovery is your user and your decision maker. So sometimes if it's an app, the user is the decision maker. You decide whether you want to download and use that app. But it could also be like in the hospital, the user could be the nurse and the patient, but the decision maker would be somebody else. It could be a committee, it could be another person. So in the process of talking to your customers, these are the ones you want to focus on. And then I just want to point out that last one, a little sneaky one, saboteur. This is someone who actually won't like your technology because it'll impact their job. We found once that we had a great thing that would help people who supervise buildings and their massive, their heating, cooling, and electrical, and knowing all the stuff in these big buildings, that the actual superintendent was the one who was the saboteur, because his value was how much he knew about the inside of the building, and then having this sort of graphically laid out that anybody could figure it out was a threat to him or them, as it turned out. So we just call these stakeholders. And so this is what I said, who is the person in the role? What are you proposing to offer? And why would they buy it? And it truly is a value proposition. And so alert, they're not buying your technology. They are buying a solution to their problem. And I've heard the analogy before, people are not coming in looking for a 3/4 inch drill. What they're looking for is a 3/4 inch hole. They don't really care how they get it. So just don't get trapped the fact because your technology is great. By the way, investors are the same thing. I'm an investor. I'm not investing in your technology, I'm investing in your business. So anyway, what you really want to do is find out what the customer truly values. And these are sort of the examples of value propositions that you might be looking for or waiting for them to talk about. So ordinarily I would have you, just anybody, I just heard some in there, can real quick on the fly, want to take a stab at doing a business thesis? You can make it up. Okay.
So our customer would be, our end users, which would be women who just had a baby within the last year. The problem, I guess.
They would subscribe, they would
Is they would download an app that helps them find answers to their problems faster. Why would they buy it? It would decrease their likelihood of dealing with postpartum depression, anxiety, or other physical issues.
Okay. Very good. And I know we thank you for volunteering and putting you on the spot like that too. So these are all hypotheses in a sense, if you really think about it, is that recent mothers actually, and enough of them have this type of problem, and the current solutions of trying to find help or assistance or information are not working. So this is what you ultimately will test. So then we get to the business side of this. Now that we know what the business thesis is, this is the hypothesis. So what are your assumptions and what must be true for this business to succeed? And one of your hypotheses is the current resources, and you need to be specific about that, or not. You're going to learn how are they trying to solve this now, or how have they tried in the past. So after you come up with your thesis, you think about what are the assumptions? And because the way you need to test those, and the way you do this is by asking questions. So hypothesis, you be clear and concise, specific, and testable. So, so one of the hypotheses, it may be something like all mothers want healthy babies. Well, I mean, is that worth testing? I mean, isn't that true just in general? So you want to be specific about, this is about their health. So you might have other stakeholders in this, by the way. So it could be the doctors, it could be the OBGYNs, it could be the pediatricians, it could be other caregivers that would be involved in influencing the this type of product or service. So these are some sample hypotheses. And one of the things that we provide is it's a worksheet that you have that you can download. This is what it looks like in there to kind of help you get started. And it talks about customer segments. Now, I just gave you an example of this, of others who would be influencers in addition to users, decision makers, because it may be that the actual doctor ends up being the one who, when they treat the patient for this, to say, here's that something can help. So they're part of the ecosystem in there. And so specifically, what are your hypotheses? What do you need to test? With what customer segment? Is it the mother? Is it the doctor? And then what are some 5 to 7 key questions that you want each stakeholder to test with them? And sometimes there are multiple industries. So a lot of times I hear your solution, oh, it could be for the automotive industry, it could be for university. You have this huge thing. You got to pick one. You're going to test a few, but you can't do them all. That's called boiling the ocean. It doesn't work. You need to find the pond to start with there. Sometimes your business is two-sided. So Airbnb, for example, you have those who want to lease a space, but you also need the other side of the market of those who have space to rent. So you need to test both sides to see, are people really willing to let total strangers come in and rent their home on short-term basis, and others, are you comfortable with leasing a non-commercial type of product, for example. Okay, so again, look through your ecosystem. We're going to give you another example a little further along here. So this is the methodology. You write down key hypothesis assumptions, do some brainstorming on questions you could ask, what stakeholders you need to view, and then prioritize 5 to 7 questions and have some backup. Use questions that are measurable. My favorite question is on a scale of 1 to 10. I tend to overuse it, but that is measurable. So you actually have somebody says, oh, it's okay, or yeah, no, I like it a lot. If you could actually have, how much do you really like it? How much you can test on how much they paid for it. And then you want the qualitative type. What do you like most about, least about? Can you give me an example of the last time you used an app that solved this type of problem? So this is the worksheet. It's literally on our website under entrepreneurial resources. And you can use this to develop it. When you work with us, you can send us what your assumptions are, what your questions are, and we'll give you some feedback to help you prep before you go out and start asking questions. Again, sample hypotheses, sample questions to test. So I do not account using job title and position as one of the 5 to 7 questions. So the reason why I say this is because when you go to want to talk to people, particularly if you're doing a business to business thing, or you're talking to people, not just consumers, nobody's going to give you a half hour. Everybody will give you 15 minutes. 10 to 15 minutes, I only have 5 to 7 questions. And so you're thinking about, you can ask a lot of questions, but what are the ones that really matter the most? But I find when I was doing this as part of mentoring one of our CMU teams, and we were cold calling law enforcement. And I'm talking not just sheriffs, I'm talking about FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, really busy people with this too. And saying I'm with Carnegie Mellon, part of a research team with the National Science Foundation, and we're looking at human trafficking. I just have 5 to 7 questions. Can you just spare me 10, 15 minutes to answer them? Well, I had hit a pain point with these people because the current solution was a 1. What they were trying to do is identify sex trafficking rings. And the reason why the Department of Homeland Security was interested is because sex trafficking is the second most profitable business crime next to drugs. And the ones who were running the rings were terrorists, and that's how they used to fund their operations. So who knew, right? I learned a lot from this too. And their biggest current solution was to get tips, which ended up mostly not panning out, but they had to follow the leads. And so this is actually, it's still in existence today. It's called Marinus Analytics. They actually opened up a London office because the UK is all over this. We have a number of organizations here in the US that are using it as well. So, and I had, when I was interviewing these people, very reluctantly, oh yeah, okay, yeah, 10 minutes. And then I couldn't get them off the phone because obviously I was asking the right questions. It was a deep, deep pain point. And I even had one, he said, look, I really do have to go, but can we continue the call tomorrow? Here's some times when I'm available. And so they were really great. And they ended up being one of our first testers of the product. So, and avoid the have you ever, because it could have been, you say, the last time you went skiing, kid, or have you ever done this with skiing? Well, yeah, I haven't skied for 30 years, so it's not a relevant thing. So try to think of a time frame in the past 3 weeks, 3 months, whatever you think is relevant. One was how often have you done something? And be careful of also the would you. We had a team that would said, if this was available, would you download and use it? And I have the data that shows this 90% of the CMU and the PIT population, it's geared to students, said they would use it. And then when they launched it, fewer than 10% actually did. So what you want to do is say, not would you, but try to find something that's relevant from their past behavior. You know, have you used or have you tried? When was the last time? Okay, so we actually use this in a sense in there. And this is, so I'm not going to make you go through this now. We don't have time. So this is the exercise number 2 in the template there. Plan who you want to interviews, the buyer's decision maker, users influence, where are you going to find them? So before I get into this a little bit, let me just follow up a little bit about how that worked with the pathology example I was giving you. So then when they went and talked to the pathologists at the large hospitals and did the interviews about how difficult it was to read the slides, you know, was speed a problem or getting the results back? What they pretty much found out is that the pathologists didn't really care about the speed. They only spent less than 10% of their time reading slides. And these are the biopsies, you know, you put them on the slide and you look at the slide and then you figure out what it is you're looking at. And they, so saving them time wasn't going to save them, have an impact on their job. And plus that they said for a lot of these biopsies, having a result in 12 hours versus 24 or 36 didn't really make a difference because the treatment, you know, nobody's going to die from these things. That this is coming up with a longer term, what would be the treatment. So speed was not huge for them, getting the results faster. But what came out from just about everybody, because they interviewed multiple hospitals, that what they cared about was accuracy. They didn't spend a whole lot of time reading the slides, so they were not experts in this too. And then they would read this and say, well, I think it's this. And they would go to a friend or another pathologist and say, what do you think? And try to confirm their opinion. So I thought, well, maybe then they tried medium-sized or smaller hospitals. And maybe this was more of an issue with them. Turned out they pretty much got the same answer. And they said, well, accuracy when we're really not sure unless it's real obvious. And most of them, we send them out to their specialized labs that actually read slides all the time. So then they started interviewing the laboratories and found out entirely different conversation. 90% of their time, they were reading slides. And we heard words like overtime, burnout, backlog, which they didn't hear from the hospitals at all. So these are the ones that really did care about speed. And that ended up changing their entire business thesis, that they were looking at pathologists who are looking to increase speed at pathologists in lab clinics that are looking to expedite the turnaround or in the volume of slides that they could read, their throughput. And I'm just shortcutted, by the way, 7 weeks of over 100 interviews. It took them to figure that out. But that's what happens as you go along on this. So where do you find them? And I'm going to focus mostly on B2B. If you have a consumer product, it's a little bit easier just to stop random people or, you know, hang out at the right place. It could be at a hospital clinic or someplace and sort of catch the moms as they go in and out. But there is, first of all, a trade association for everything. You can just put it in there, something association. So this one happened to be on healthcare. I was working with the Jewish Healthcare Foundation on a program. And so these are different places where you can find people to interview. These are what I call the ecosystem maps, and I don't know how to get rid of that. But this is again in the healthcare industry. And I don't expect you to read this, but these are companies you don't even know exist. And they classify them sort of by the type of things that they do. And then you can then do more research into the companies itself to find people to interview. And this was drones. I have a number of drone products too. And these are where they play. Are they providing parts? Are they doing repairs? Are they doing the software? They're doing the hardware. This one is on fashion, clothing. This one's chemical. This is self-driving autos. Who knew? And these is truly the trade associations. You can see they're producer members and associate members. So these are, you can usually get access to them. You can find out who was the speaker because it's hard. People don't mind doing the interviews. It just have trouble finding the people to interview. So, and we can help you with that. Here's batteries, big socket there. Payment systems, sort of who are all the players and how do they play. Traffic, smart traffic. This is another antibody series. So how to do interviews to test your hypotheses. And Steve Blank, if you don't know it, he's sort of the godfather of startup world, the lean startup in there. Get out of the building. As I said before, you cannot Google your way through this. And what this really means is you need to do face-to-face interviews, but certainly you can do Zoom or do Skype. So why is doing it in person or where you can see the person important? Exactly. Are they getting enthusiastic? When I was interviewing the FBI people, they just got animated. I could hear the excitement over the phone, but you can't pick that up in a survey. And plus that, there's no way to design a survey that doesn't what I call lead the witness. You end up inserting what I call confirmation bias. And secondly, well, here, let me give you the example on this too. I have a team, it was called Smart Bell, 2 MBAs and a workout buff, and they had actually met each other through a Connects. And they came in one day and they said that tracking their workout routines was extremely important to them. One of them had a little notebook. Somebody else had something they were using on the app on their phone. They said, you're going to solve this problem. The engineer, he's going to come up with a sensor that you literally will put on each machine that you're working out on. And you're going to have an app on your phone. And that sensor will be able to measure how many reps you're doing and what strength, and then just send that to your phone. And he said, we've already sent out a survey. We had 50 responses and everybody thought it was a really great idea. I said, okay, let's do this a little differently. We're going to change our questions a little bit so that you're not asking specifically about your solution. It's more about, is this a problem? And you're going to go stop random people coming out of the CMU gym. You're going to go over to the Pitt gym. There was a gold gym, I think it was across the river, and there was one in Squirrel Hill. And it was over a period of time when I think was a small break. And so 2 of them were going to be actually going back to their hometown. I said, just stop random strangers and ask them these 5 to 7 questions and come back afterwards. So they came back looking really sheepish, saying, well, we had everybody responding that they really thought it was a good idea, but most people just said, what's the problem? And I pretty much have the same routine. I do the same thing. Sometimes I switch it up, but I don't have to track it. It's not a problem. But they were a little puzzled. I said, well, okay, you sent out an email survey. Who did you send it to? Friends? I mean, how many random surveys from total strangers do you all answer? So what they ended up is getting a skewed sampling population, and they were their friends, and friends just want to make you feel good and say it's a great idea. And or they were all workout buffs and they thought, oh, okay, this would be a good idea as well. But when they actually went and talked to people they didn't know, they got a more honest response. Interestingly, what came out of it, though, he said what everybody was complaining about was getting on the machines. And I said, tell me a little bit more. They said, well, it turns out it was a big thing with the leg machines in particular for some reason. The people were just saying that when they went, they tried to find a time when it would be good that they actually could get through the machines and do their workout in a reasonable amount of time. I said, okay, let us then go for another stakeholder. Let's call it the gym manager or owner. And let's come up with a different set of questions for them. Way different result. So, for example, they said one of the gym managers, and they came back and said, oh my God, yes, I get the complaints all the time about I need to buy another leg machine. They said, well, first of all, they're expensive. 2, I don't have an infinite amount of room. So what am I going to give up in order to get that machine? I said, to be honest, other than walking around, I have no idea how much usage these machines are getting. And if you think it's bad just in general, wait till one of them breaks down. You know, you need to take your car in every 5,000 miles to get the oil change, to get the tune-up. Said, I have no idea when to call in the rep to service these machines because it's based upon usage. And he said, and it's driving me nuts. I would pay for information about that. Cha-chink, cha-chink, cha-chink. And they found out that that was a universal type of thing. And then the engineer just saying, oh, duh, this is the easiest thing in the world. I just put a sensor that does nothing more than saying this machine's being used. And I can create like the Yelp for the gym and saying for each of these machines, you can see when the biggest usage is. And then they went back out and they talked to more of the clients or the customers of the gym. And they said they actually did have flexibility. And if they could see that this was the period of least usage or a better chance that they would begin to shift and adjust the times when they went in for the workouts. So my point of this is they went and they did the survey, the customer discovery, they did it the right way. They shifted totally from a B to C, business to consumer type of model to a business to business without writing one word of code, building one prototype or anything, totally shifted. So that's an example of why you want to do customer discovery the right way. And I'll just say, be careful because sometimes you fall in love with your solution. You got to fall in love with the problem. Okay, so 15 minutes, 5 to 7 questions. You're not allowed to talk about your idea. You have to find a way to ask the question about, it's about the problem because this is not the stage to talk about your solution. 100% verify that you're solving the right problem. Okay, so how do you do this? You start out either you're by phone or if you're stopping to people. Said, I'm doing some research on workout routines. I am do you have 15 minutes, maybe answer 5 to 7 questions? And mostly people will say yes, and you can even back it up to 10 if it's like a consumer. Student card works really well. So wear your t-shirt, wear your cap, do something and say, I'm a CMU student, I'm doing a research project. They don't have to know it's not for a class. But we have found, and you will hear this from particularly the alumni saying that they were really sorry they graduated is because they couldn't use the student card like they had used before. People really want to help our students. Occasionally you can just say it's not a sales call, nothing to sell it. This is truly just research. I suggest you start out with a few friends or friendlies just to practice this. Your first couple interviews are going to feel awkward, or they're going to look at you weird and saying, what was that? So you learn better how to phrase them. Just get over it. Just the biggest thing to do is just start doing it. Then you have to go after people you don't know. And at the end, you get to say, what else? Who else should I talk to? And this is particularly if you're in a corporation or a business in there, because there are a lot of stakeholders. And then occasionally you can just say, what else should I have asked? Because you're pretty focused right now. And they were saying, well, I was going to say that I tried something a couple months ago that I just wanted to give you some feedback. And you hadn't asked about, you were asking about their current solution. You hadn't asked about what they had tried 6 months ago. So things can pop up. To get you started, there's a pamphlet. It's called Talking to Humans. It's free. You can download it. It's a PDF. I read it over lunch. But it is probably the best examples, for example, of writing emails that will get you past the gatekeepers to talk to people, particularly if you're doing cold calls. I would also say that when you're doing this, you get a premium version of LinkedIn for free for 30 days. Before you start interviewing, make sure your LinkedIn profile is up to date. Because when you contact professionals, that's one of the first things they're going to do is they're going to look you up and you want to look like this is going to be worth their time. You're reputable. But also the premium version of LinkedIn helps you to make connections. And I would particularly direct you, if you can find the match, to CMU alumni. Fabulous results that we hear that alumni want to help current students, and they will also spend more time answering your questions and make introductions to other people in their organizations. If it's a little sensitive, look for former employees. They're much more willing to talk about the competition or the or sort of insider stuff that they wouldn't do if they were a current employee. So the questions are not a checklist, it's a prompt. And so again, what you want to have is a conversation to some extent, and be open to iterate and follow up and explore more deeply. So that's the second reason you want to talk to people in person, is in addition to reading body language or enthusiasm, is they're going to say something, you go, I wasn't expecting that. And then just ask, can you tell me more? So in the smart belt example, what happened is people started to talk about getting on machines. That's not what they were interested in at all, but they knew then to listen, say, can you tell me more? And that led to ultimately the winning pivot. So here's some what I call tips where the magic happens. How are you solving it now, or tried to solve the problems in the past? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate that solution? No matter what number they give you, I don't care if it's a 9 or a 2, ask, why did you give it that number? And actually, I learned this from one of the students who did this too, and it was fabulous. Then write down everything they say in their words, in the order they say it. The reason is they're giving you the feature list. So you probably have an idea on your technology or on your solution that these are the things that is essential for the MVP. And you need to verify whether you need to spend those times writing those things and putting that as part of it. So here's an example. Reid Hoffman, founder of LinkedIn. After LinkedIn had been up and running for 7 or 8 years, used worldwide by people, highly adopted, was on a panel And he was talking about the early days when they were first getting started. And they had identified with their team 5 essential features that they thought was essential for to have a minimal viable product experience for anybody who downloaded and used it. They had written 4, and they were running out of money. But the team was adamant, if we don't have the 5, then we won't really be testing the product. It's like building 4/5 of a bridge. It's just not going to be good enough. But Reed's in there thinking, oh God, I hate it when I have to go out and raise money. I lose time. There might be other competitors that are, beginning to ramp up. And 2, every time I raise money, I'm giving away part of my company. But he went home that night and he really thought hard about it, thinking about the arguments of the team and what the downside was. Came in the next day and he said on this panel, he said, okay, we're launching with 4. Team almost mutinied. And he said, nope, I'm the CEO, I got the majority shares, we're going with 4. And that's what they did. And he said, to this day, we have never written the 5th feature. So this is what they thought. This is before customer discovery. But in this case, what they're doing is they're telling you this is the things that they like most about or what is missing from the current solution. So minimally what it is you need to include. So they're giving you not the list, but they're also giving you the priority. And if something you're planning to do, you thought that just be great value for them, it doesn't come up. You can test it afterwards, but see if they bring it up. It's a good test. Secondly, they're talking about it in their language. Have any of you ever sold before? Actually been in sales positions? Okay. So what you do first is you talk with the customer and you get them talking about what their problem is or what their environment is. And then you say, well, I have a solution that might help with, and you kind of repeat back their words and that resonates with them. So when you get around to ultimately marketing or selling this, you're talking about the solution in the way they talk about it, not how you talk about it. And what they're also telling you is they're giving you the competitive assessment. Their current solution is only a 3. But they're telling you why they don't like it. So here's, when you come up with your competitive analysis, you know exactly what you're up against. But let's just say they gave it an 8. I would ask them, what would it take to give it a 10? And that could be the competitive differentiator, that one thing or 2 things that really would make the difference. Listen for the unexpected. That's what I was talking about before. That's where you do the pivots before you get too far along. And if you begin to hear it, for example, getting on the machines, you can then on next round of interviews begin to test that and ask that question, just to see if get people to verify it. You can sometimes even go back to other past people you interviewed if you have contact information, say you were really helpful. I just have one more question. So you want to do pivots. I dread it when I hear pivots and somebody's been out and up in business for a year. That's lost time and money. You want to do is get through that as much before you actually spend time and money developing the product. So I have a case study here, which I will not have time to go through entirely. It's called Risk Call. And it was a smartwatch that patients would wear that they could call a nurse at any time from any location. They didn't have to be tethered, to the call button on the wall. The nurses would have a similar one that they could hear, or they could see that the patient in 22B needed help and what type of help. They didn't have to be at the nurse's station or see the light over the wall. And he, his name is Srinath, came up with this after he was in a hospital and he had a problem in the middle of the night and he kept on calling the nurse and nobody showed up. He got out of bed and tried to get to the door to call the nurse and he fell. Happily, he did not hurt himself badly, but he thought, we need a better system. And that was the origin of how this came along. And so his business thesis is hospital administrators will lease the risk call smartwatches and letting nurses receive immediate notification and response time tracking platform so they could see how fast the responses were in order to reduce the number of injuries patients occur. And his hypothesis, slow response time leads to serious and expensive injuries. Nurses are not responding faster because they lack awareness, not because they're lazy. Hospitals administrators would pay for a new product or service to reduce injuries and also to get data on number of requests and response time. So he looked at hospitals and nursing homes, and then he thought of all the stakeholders, users, nurses and patients. Influencers were the patient's families. They want their loved one to get good care. Recommenders were nurses, patients. Decision maker, he didn't know if insurance companies were involved. Potential saboteur would be the IT manager. IT managers in many organizations really hate introducing new systems. It just complicates things, particularly in hospitals. And so he just wanted to make sure that that was not going to be a roadblock. He did do secondary research to learn the size of the problem. What he also did, he did shadowing. He went through and he got the TB testing, and he got approved that he could literally walk around, follow the nurses around. And he went during the day, he went at the night, and did a lot of in-person interviews. And these are the different stakeholders that he ended up interviewing. So these are the sample hypotheses he used, and this presentation is available. And so you can use this when you will look a little bit more closely at a question that tested current solution, competitive assessment, a measurable as well as a qualitative type of response, and then who else should you talk to? And so these are the questions to test what the nurses, the hypothesis, they weren't responding faster because they didn't know that the patient needed help. Hospitals, turns out insurance didn't really care because if you injure yourself in the hospital, insurance company does not cover it. The hospital has to pay for it. It's a 1.2 billion annual problem for the hospitals because they have to pay for getting the patient well again. And they learned that if patients are not responded to in 2.5 minutes, then they try to help themselves, and that's when the injuries occur. But they also found out, and he didn't know to do this, Medicare is beginning to reimburse hospitals in general based upon the patient satisfaction ratings. So the difference between a 3-star and a 4-star was thousands of dollars in profit to the hospitals. And he found out by accident, there actually is a patient satisfaction manager who's responsible for measuring this. And that ended up being one of the greatest influencers. So nursing homes, they needed it, but they didn't have the financial incentive to do this because they didn't get the Medicare reimbursement. And the ultimate decision maker was the CFO. The IT manager didn't care because all he used was the existing internet. So we eliminated the saboteur problem. And what he wanted to do then was do a test. So after you do these interviews, in this case too, he wanted to do a 10-bed, 30-day test. And getting hospitals to do any testing, particularly when patients are involved, is extremely difficult. So we went out to the hospitals and just asked if anybody would be willing to do the pilot, hoping one would sign up. They all signed up. And Srinath came back and said, now what do I do? I said, well, how much is it going to cost you to do the test? And it was about $5,000 because he had these watches and he didn't have economy of scale in making them, but he had to get enough for everybody to have it. And he said, $5,000. I said, okay, we're not trying to make a profit. We're just trying not to lose money. Let's go out and see if anybody would sign up for $5,000. Let's see who really cares. They all signed up. He said, now what do I do? I said, I don't know. We should have charged more. But anyway, he picked one and they end up negotiating what they said. No, we want to do 30 beds over 3 months. And it turns out it was successful, but he learned a lot too, the things he had to adjust about getting the watches clean and making sure they got charged and every time too. So when you do your customer discovery interviews, put a little check mark next to the person who was most enthusiastic, willing to spend the most amount of time. And then when you get ready to say, okay, I am positive now, I am solving the right problem. Am I solving it the right way? You go back to these people and say exactly that. You were so helpful. Would you just take a look at my solution and just give me your opinion? You're not selling. And inevitably, you will get, somebody will say, ooh, can I try that? So anybody want to guess? There is a magic number here. Throw out a number. How many interviews do you need to do? 100.
8.
8. Eight, yep. 60. Okay. 42. Okay, here's the winner. When I first saw this, when I was participating in the MSFI core program in there, and I do this for a living, right? I saw 100. I said, where did you get that number? And they said, well, you know, we've been doing this with over thousands of teams, and we find that those who stop short of 100 really don't know their market, or they have not found their pivot. And since then, I've been using this number, and I have gotten religion about it because I see that it works. If you stop too short before you talk to enough people, you have not gotten a broad enough, really, a marketing sample to know that you're solving the right problem. And and I will tell you, the teams I work with that are doing customer discovery the right way, including 100 interviews, 100% of them have ended up changing what they're doing. They have pivoted before they've actually built the product. Sometimes they're small pivots, other times it's pretty massive. Look at SmartValve, from a B2C business to consumer model to a B2B, because they did the customer discovery interviews the right way.
So now wouldn't majority of them be repeats? Like you would hear like the same thing over and over?
Then you ask different questions, or you try, sometimes you need to ask different people.
Okay.
So if you talk to 10 pathologists in large hospitals and they all say the same thing,
Yeah.
move on. And then they said, okay, now we've got to do those, and we're going to try smaller hospitals. So they did that, but they have to talk to multiple people sometimes, the actual pathologist, the manager of the pathology. So the doctor, does it really matter getting the results back sooner? And that's when they end up in the clinics. And then when you got into the clinics, it was like you verified, oh, this is where I need to be. But then you want to find out how they make software, how they buy software, who's involved in making that decision. What are the got to work out the complementary with the different things, about installing the type of thing. Is there any kind of training in there too? So you ask different questions as you move along. But if you stop too short, you don't actually get to that. And avoids unnecessary pivots, compelling sales pitch, prioritize, you learn about the competition. You start to build the relationship. And by the way, I'm an angel investor. I've invested in 35 businesses. And when you actually come and make a pitch, I will ask you about your customer discovery. And if you tell me you just did 10 interviews, you will not have the credibility you need on the part of the investor. So it also will come up in contests. You'll find if you participate in the Guinness, somebody's going to ask you about your customer discovery. Or is this all in my head? I have the perfect solution, but you haven't tested it with the market. So fall in love with the problem, not your solution. So then you go on to the validation. Am I solving it the right way? And then usually if you go back and test, somebody will say, can they try it? You'll get a referenced pilot customer. And that is gold. So Project Olympus, we're the startup incubation for CMU. There's a one-page application. When you apply, you'll be assigned an entrepreneur in residence who will then sit down with you on a one-on-one basis and come up with, you agree upon the next steps. You work at your own speed. You are a student, but on the other hand, we expect progress over time. And we've been doing this for quite some time. We've worked with over 1,200 startup teams. Which have raised over $760 million of other people's money. And we've had 18 exits last year. So we had 3, all students, all gone through our programs. And I would just say that there are a number that are here, that have we can help you get into these accelerator programs. We've been told that we give you an unfair competitive advantage because you're so prepared when you go to apply that they're really impressed, again, that you're solving the right problem the right way. So you can join Olympus. And this is a lovely place to work, which is fine. We're that building over there with the yellow pipe in. We're the old place. It's right across the street. It's 2 buildings, 3 stories each. Used to be an old horse stable where I sit. So it's old and funky. Here you have to be careful, what you hang up in there. We literally knock down walls if necessary or drill holes in walls. That's where this season did their reference problem. We were running water from one building to another building. Anyway, there's also the MSFI core part of the hub that if anybody here a PhD, okay, it could be then that you're eligible if you want to participate in a regional NSF program. It's a 3 to 4 week. There's also a national program, but we also have what's called a customer discovery Kickstarter, which emulates the MSFI core process. We just started had our first session of the cohort last night. It's 4 weeks, and then we'll be doing another one in November. If you're interested, you can listen to come to an information session on it to see if you want to participate. You'll do the same thing you do with the one-on-one with the EIR, but you do it as part of a cohort. And you'll find that you actually learn from each other, and it's sort of fun to do it as a group. And it's 1 hour a week where we meet as a group. Then you'll have to do some interviews in there. So there is some work in there too. And you'll meet with your one-on-one with the EIR, who again will personalize this. So, yeah, that's the kickstart. So that's it. Okay, this is a huge presentation. I only covered about 1/3 of it, but I have lots of case studies and other examples and the forms and all this too on the back if you want to get when Allison uploads it onto the in the workshop archives that you can go through at your own leisure, or if we see you at Olympus, we can walk through some of them as well. Question? I ran over almost.
So if you have more questions regarding this particular topic, if you have more questions regarding this topic, who's the right person should I approach?
Fill out the one-page application and we'll find something. So I have CIR, and sometimes it looks like a medical one, it's literally a doctor who, or somebody who works in the healthcare.
Targeted people, I want to know more
You
about the
could-
process.
About the process.
Yeah.
Oh, you could, probably me. I mean, if you want to know more about it.
So I'm currently attending a 5-month training program offered by Stanford University for a founders like us. And the first activity is like a customer interview. So I'm preparing the interview questions, but I'm confused with some stages.
Okay.
I need help.
Okay, well, that's fine.